SpongeBob, Danny, Jimmy, Timmy, all four in the same game? In 2025? We are so back, baby. When Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny was revealed out of nowhere at Summer Game Fest 2025, my mind was completely blown. Nickelodeon has been putting out banger games, including crossovers, for quite a while now, but it's been a minute since they put out a crossover that was focused on a single player offering. You really have to travel back to 2009 to find the last time Nickelodeon attempted something similar to what Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny is doing. And with the main four from the Nicktoons Unite series returning here for the first time since that series ended, something Nickelodeon Extreme Tennis couldn't even do despite being one of the rare games to actually get Timmy Turner, well, it's little surprise that Nick fans were hyped to the moon for this release. As somebody who just went back and ranked every single Nicktoons Unite game, Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny was unironically one of my most anticipated games for 2025. So the story of Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny kicks off with Timmy playing a version of Dungeons & Dragons, where he wishes that he could be in a real version of the game. Cosmo and Wanda mess this wish up, apparently due to the use of these dice of power that they randomly have. This messed up wish causes some multiversal shenanigans and brings 8 Nicktoons universes together. Of course, once this happens, Cosmo and Wanda's wish powers immediately stop working. This kind of thing was a staple of the Nicktoons Unite series. Now that you're stranded in a Nicktoons version of Dungeons & Dragons, it's up to you to collect all of the dice of power so you can get back home. To collect these dice, we're going to have to do some good old-fashioned dungeon crawling, with a healthy dose of RPG elements sprinkled in. Gameplay here definitely feels inspired by something like Hades, and it's a genre that is super unique for a Nicktoons game. The original Nicktoons Unite game was clearly inspired by X-Men Legends for its gameplay, so it kind of feels natural to see Dice of Destiny taking inspiration from a super successful game from its own era. Players can jump into Dice of Destiny in single player or local co-op with up to 4 players joining in. I played the entire campaign in single player, and while I love the 4-player co-op option because it really takes me back to the original Unite game, getting a bunch of friends together is going to be an almost impossible task in 2025. Definitely would have loved to see some sort of online element here. As you drop into your first dungeon, you'll get to choose from one of 5 characters, but no matter who you choose, your character's abilities will be quite limited. To start out, you have one basic attack and a dodge roll, and that's basically it. You can also hold the dodge button to run. I chose Leonardo, and he Naruto runs apparently. In true Dungeons & Dragons fashion, characters have an enormous list of stats that alter how they all feel. There's health and mana, damage, defense, evasion, agility, dexterity, intelligence, strength, and critical hit chance stats to upgrade. It's a pretty comprehensive and in-depth stat list, but I can't say the game does a great job teaching you what a lot of these do. Some stats are super obvious, but others like dexterity or intelligence are much more vague, at least to me. As you start hacking, slashing, shooting, or spellcasting through dungeons, you'll find that there are plenty of items that can be equipped to upgrade and personalize throughout your journey. There are weapons to boost various offensive stats, armor to help with defense, as well as buff random things like your speed, talismans that increase pretty much any stat available, consumables that are basically just potions which will buff you for a window of time, and skins, which as far as I'm aware, the only skins in the game at the moment are paid DLC. To add even more depth here, the items you find or purchase can also be upgraded to stronger tiers. Each level in Dice of Destiny generally consists of you mowing down enemies and occasionally having to solve very minor puzzles. These usually involve you activating switches to open doors, which then allow you to progress towards the end of the dungeon. To spice things up, you'll usually find one of these challenge statues in each level, which lock you into an arena with some sort of gimmick in effect, while you're tasked with clearing a set number of enemies out before the time limit runs out. Successfully complete the challenge and you'll see a modifier applied to the amount of items you can pick up from smashing crates and defeating enemies, as well as getting some new loot. Taking down enemies will see your XP grow and you'll eventually level up, which will open up a lot more skills for your character. To go alongside your basic attack and dodge roll, the 2 other face buttons on your controller can be assigned new skills, as well as the 2 trigger buttons. These skills require mana to be used, so you can't just spam them uncontrollably, although mana regenerates over time, so you do get to use them constantly. Leveling up quickly sees you have access to more skills than can be equipped, so you start having to decide on which skills you like the most, as well as which skills are most effective in your current situation. They also give you access to an ultimate ability that does insane damage, and is usually a fun reference to a moment from one of the shows, or movies in SpongeBob's case. As expected of a game like this, you'll collect gold on your journey, which plays a role after defeating your first dungeon. Completing this will take you to the Tangle, which is your hub world that contains a number of different shops. The first place I ran to was Pearl's Hero Boutique. I was most curious about how the game would handle having access to multiple characters. Would I have to level up each character individually? Nope. Instead, you have a singular level that is applied to all characters, allowing you to switch between dungeons with no drawbacks. My initial idea was that I'd switch between each of the available characters to get a feel for them, and then I'd probably settle on a main for the rest of the game. Instead, I actually found that I enjoyed every character enough that I wanted to switch out characters for every dungeon across the whole game. I cannot express how rare that is for any game, let alone a Nicktoons game. In the Unite series, there were always characters I barely wanted to touch because they felt inferior, but that's not the case for Dice of Destiny. I certainly had characters I liked less than others, but there legitimately isn't a single character here that I would call bad. Combat just feels right with literally every character. There are also great quality of life additions, like making every single item, except consumables, available for use across every character. They could have made things super tedious and had completely separate inventories for every character, which would have hampered the ability to jump back and forth between characters and ultimately push you towards more grinding or side quests. But instead, the devs have tried to put up as few roadblocks between you enjoying every character as possible. Other shops you'll find around the Tangle include a weapon shop run by Carl, a potion shop run by Soccer, and an upgrade shop run by Donatello. Soccer and Donnie's shops use these gem shards as currency, which are certainly a lot harder to come by than gold, and it feels like this is an area of the game where the devs were really pushing you towards doing side quests. Yes, side quests are present here, and it's an aspect where the NPCs in the Tangle play a big part. You'll get Tommy Pickles or Plankton handing out quests, and it's a great way to make yourself a little richer if you're willing to take a brief detour from the main quest. And so quickly you'll find yourself in a tight little gameplay loop. You drop into dungeons, smash up all the enemies, often on your way to acquiring some sort of MacGuffin that allows you to continue your journey, and then you come back to the Tangle to make some upgrades. The loop is satisfying and snappy, as is the combat gameplay. This isn't usually a genre of game I'm drawn to, so I was impressed with how much I was digging the gameplay. Unfortunately, this isn't a perfect game, and I think my biggest issue is the difficulty, or the lack of one to be more specific. When you enter a new dungeon, the game will give you 3 difficulty options. It's basically easy, normal, and hard options, with each of the options showing a recommended level for your character to be before taking it on. I initially started on normal before almost immediately bumping it up to hard. This was okay for a little bit, but I soon found the hard difficulty to be trivial at best. This game is just way too easy, which I think is a big missed opportunity because it feels like this game is targeting an older, more nostalgic Nickelodeon audience than most previous Nicktoons games. I think the biggest issues with the difficulty stem from the leveling, as well as the game's economy. You level up way too fast here. Firstly, you stop learning new attacks at level 16, a level that you'll probably hit about 3 hours into the game. Essentially, you just stop caring about leveling up like less than halfway through the main campaign because you stop getting meaningful, tangible rewards. The level cap goes all the way to 40, so you're still leveling up your stats, but you're not unlocking anything, and that kinda takes away a lot of the enjoyment. And then the game's gold economy is way off. I had way too much money in Dice of Destiny at all times. There literally wasn't a single moment where I couldn't just buy whatever I wanted, which also contributed to the easy difficulty. After completing each dungeon, or maybe it's when I leveled up, I'm really not too sure, Carl's shop would always have a stronger version of each character's weapon available, as well as some better armor. Each time I was able to buy this without issue, and I feel like it definitely contributed to the non-existent challenge. Dice of Destiny very quickly settles into a rhythm of fighting through dungeons, getting to a boss battle, winning, and then unlocking a new character, as well as moving on to a new set of dungeons. The first character you unlock is Susie, who just sort of randomly shows up after the first boss battle. It's a poor introduction, and unfortunately a lot of the unlocked characters don't actually get much narrative to support how or why they have now shown up. But it is right around this time that Dice of Destiny's story really starts to unfold. The Flame Fatale, consisting of Ember, Azula, and Angelica, show up for the first time, and they make it known that they're trying to nab the Dice of Power for their mysterious master. You then unlock Jimmy, and this is where the game starts to get weird when they kind of pick and choose when they want to reference or allude to Nicktoons Unite existing. Jimmy and Timmy interact as if they've never met before, which is weird on multiple levels because you also have the Jimmy-Timmy Power Hour crossovers as well. We then move on to the TMNT themed world, which is also when you start amassing a decent number of NPCs in the Tangle. And honestly, I think the NPCs genuinely being involved in the game's story is what makes this feel like a huge and important crossover. They'll give you side quests and then actually show up in cutscenes as well, so they feel like a big part of the game rather than just an obligation to include, which is how it felt in some of the Unite games. The next character we get is Danny, and this is where the allusion to Nicktoons Unite gets weird. They make a bunch of wink wink nudge nudge references to feeling like they've met before, which is cool, but it plays out a little awkward with the previous Jimmy and Timmy interaction. And in general, it just makes me wish they straight up acknowledged the existence of Nicktoons Unite. I'm not sure if there's some reason why they can't directly acknowledge it, but hey, I guess I'll take any references I can get. With Danny unlocked, we head to the Ghost Zone, where Jenny shows up randomly in the post-boss fight cutscene. I think this might have been an oversight from the devs, because she's just standing in this group shot before eventually being introduced later. It's from this next portion where I think the game, and clearly the devs, started running out of a bit of steam. At this point in the game, all characters are unlocked, and you've had access to all character skills for what feels like an eternity. The last major pull driving you through the game are the boss battles, the mystery surrounding the narrative, and the next locations you get to explore. Unfortunately, that last one sort of fizzles out. The next area you go to is just some generic prehistoric volcanic area, which is pretty lame. You then head to the Fire Nation, which is cool, before going to Fairy World. Side note, this is where I hit max character level with 2 worlds still left in the campaign. This causes another issue as I no longer had any incentive to even fight enemies. I was max level and I had all of the abilities, so it didn't make sense to do anything other than run to the end of dungeon portal. Annoyingly, beating Fairy World unlocks more Fairy World. One thing to know going into this game is that it is heavily skewed towards Fairly Odd Parents. You know how the final Unite game was called SpongeBob featuring Nicktoons Globs of Doom? Well, this game could easily be renamed Fairly Odd Parents featuring Nicktoons The Dice of Destiny, because it's first and foremost a Timmy Turner narrative. This final world also feels like the devs were either rushed or just running out of steam. They start adding strange things like a bunch of invincible cannons that weirdly turn the levels into bullet hell shmups, and the levels in this final world straight up reuse giant chunks of levels that you've visited previously, which makes it feel so repetitive. It's such a damn shame that this happens right at the finale, because everything prior to this is so good. This is usually the part of the review where I would then tack on a section where I whinge and moan about the boss battles. You know me, I'm the #1 boss battle hater on the internet, but surprisingly, the boss battles here are pretty good. The first boss battle against Plankton was a decent challenge, and I kinda loved that he's the only boss in the game that the Nicktoons decide to bring back to the Tangle, just to have him imprisoned.
The thing that boys have to go through. Being chained up all the time or something.
The second boss battle was against Angelica, who commands a creepy as hell spider Cynthia, and she was even more of a challenge to the point where I suffered my first, and one of my only, deaths in the game. Unfortunately, this is the point where the game's difficulty started losing control, And every boss battle after this was just laughably easy. You've got Snake Karai that I stomped with Jimmy, Ember who I embarrassed with Leo, the Dirty Bubble who was a real random appearance and promptly defeated, Azula who wasn't even remotely a challenge, and then an evil Jorgen to round out the boss battles. There's also a final boss battle with the Game Master that I can't reveal or show today, so tune into my video ranking every Nicktoons crossover game ever if you want to see me talk about that. All I can say is that this was also unfortunately very easy. Despite these boss battles being really easy, the actual ideas behind them were almost always really cool, and if they had a better difficulty, they would have been a whole lot of fun. For me, it took around 8 hours to beat, but that was with my focus being entirely on the main quest line. You'll get a bit more out of the game if you chip away at the side quests, although that will probably just worsen the difficulty issues. After sitting on it for a little bit, I have 100% confidence when I say this. Nicktoons and the Dice of Destiny is the best narrative ever for a Nicktoons game. No other Nicktoons game even comes close. Sure, it doesn't have the flashy 3D cutscenes of the Unite series, but in terms of telling a compelling narrative that actually makes sense, Dice of Destiny is so far ahead of any other Nicktoons game. The amount of character interactions we get here is an absolute treat. The game is filled with great humour and genuine writing for all of the shows represented, and it's so obvious that this is easily the most effort that has ever been put into a narrative for a Nicktoons game. This is genuinely a dream come true. As I do with every Nicktoons crossover, we have to put the actual crossover elements themselves under the microscope. I think they've done a superb job with the crossover here. Sure, I always wish that the roster was larger, but they fleshed out 9 genuinely fun playable characters, they included a bunch of representation through NPCs who actually play a role in the game, and then you get even more representation through the villains, boss battles, and the worlds themselves. One of the more annoying aspects of Battle for Volcano Island and Attack of the Toybots is that they lean too hard into unique settings instead of familiar locations. Dice of Destiny has the best of both worlds by adapting the show locations into a Dungeons and Dragons theme. The game unfortunately doesn't go beyond the 8 shows represented via playable characters, at least as far as I could tell, which I guess is the biggest knock on the crossover elements. It would have been really cool to see characters from other shows pop up through NPCs. Also, as I mentioned, it really sucks that one of the worlds is wasted on a generic theme, and the final world just rehashes Fairy World again. It's especially baffling when Rugrats, My Life as a Teenage Robot, and Jimmy Neutron don't get their own themed worlds. Looking at the overall presentation of the game, Dice of Destiny is an interesting one. We're obviously used to only ever seeing the Nicktoons crossover in 3D, unless it's on a handheld, so it was interesting seeing everybody brought into the same 2D style. I think all of the characters look pretty natural here, and it probably helps that they all have a central uniting Dungeons and Dragons theme to tie everything together. At first, I was a bit turned off by the cutscene art style. It's a bit basic and does feel low budget, but it grew on me more throughout the game, to the point where it no longer stood out to me. In-game, on the other hand, looks great. I was particularly impressed the first time I went to the Tangle. It's just a fantastic art style that works really well for me. And speaking of the Tangle, god did I love the theme for this area. And in general, the game's composer, Carlos Aguilar, did a superb job with the soundtrack. It's very similar to the art style, where he's taken familiar vibes and themes from each show's soundtrack, and then mashed it up with medieval theming. Last, and certainly not least, we've got the voice acting. The fact that every bit of dialogue is voiced in this game blew my mind. There is so much talking here, and all of it is voiced. Now, some of the voices we know and love are absent. Like, I was so confused when Zuko showed up, and it clearly wasn't Dante Bosco. But the fact that they went the whole way with voice acting is truly appreciated. Nick fans love this, so I'm sure it's going to be massively appreciated. Probably my only major negative with the presentation is that there can be a lot of visual clutter on the screen. There are just way too many HUD elements, with a map, your character stats, currently equipped abilities, and quest markers all taking up screen real estate. Then you'll have other things pop up, like if you have a potion's effects currently running, and that just adds to the problem. This gets particularly bad if you take on side quests, as these sit in your quest marker section permanently until completed. You can turn off the quest markers, but then this also stops displaying where you're supposed to go in your current level. My recommendation is to only take on side quests that you're going to complete immediately. This is the best Nicktoons game ever made. It nails almost every single aspect, and the only major flaw is that the final world feels like it was rushed. The crossover is nailed, there's a clear appreciation for Nicktoons and Nicktoons Unite lore, and overall, it's just a genuinely good game to play. If they'd named this Nicktoons Unite Dice of Destiny, it would have been a worthy revival of the Nicktoons Unite series. If you want to see what I'd rank this compared to all the other Nicktoons crossover games, make sure you keep an eye out for my gigantic 3-hour-long video coming very soon, where I rank every Nicktoons crossover game in history. And if you've got any questions about Dice of Destiny that you want answered before you jump in and experience it yourself, feel free to ask them down below in the comments. But until next time, later.